Chairs No Waiting, episode number 629, Newcastle 2002, panel discussion, part 2. Two Chairs No Waiting is brought to you each week by the folks over at weaversdepartmentstore.com. Drop by over at Weavers and check out the great stuff they got there. Loaded goat stuff. That's right, you can get loaded goat, just like Otis. You can get t-shirts. Head over there and check those out. While you're there, you might want to get a 1960s t-shirt, which has got Andy, Barney, and Opie on it, celebrating the 60th anniversary. And also the Mayberry Trivia book by Scott Hopkins. Go over to weaversdepartmentstore.com and check it out. Two Chairs No Waiting is also brought to you by donations by listeners like you. The executive producer of tonight's episode, number 629, is Susan and Wynn Arnold. So Susan and Wynn, thank you very much. And thank you very much for being here with me. I'm Alan Newsom, the host of Two Chairs No Waiting, and I love talking about the Andy Griffith Show, and I think you probably already know that. Or if you're new, you may not, but I love talking about it. I can talk about it anytime. We're going to be discussing on this episode the second part, the final part of a panel discussion that was held up in Indiana at the Mayberry in the Midwest that was in Newcastle, Indiana. So for 3 years, starting in 2002, they held Mayberry in the Midwest in Indiana, in Newcastle, Indiana. And then it stopped, and then it moved eventually over to Danville, Indiana, and it's been there for the last 6 times they've done it. So about 7 years now it's been there. But this was the original. This was the very first one, and I believe it was a very early event. You're going to see some of the cast members in here. James Best is one of them, and I believe this is one of the very first events, real early anyway, that James did with the other Mayberry cast members. So we're going to hear from Howard Morris. That's Ernest T. Bass. Betty Lynn, Thelma Lou. You're going to hear from, as I said, James Best. That's Jim Lindsey on the Andy Griffith Show. Roscoe P. Coltrane. I can't do Roscoe. Maggie Peterson. That's Charlene. She's on here. As are all 4 Darling boys. That's Rodney and Doug Dillard, Dean Webb, and Mitch Jayne. They're all sitting at the front table. And this is part 2. So if you didn't hear part 1, I definitely encourage you to go and listen to it. Yeah, you could wait till this one's over and then go listen to the one from last week. They don't have to be listened to in order. But it's a lot of fun hearing them talk. The audio is not perfect because this was recorded on a 8mm camcorder that I was holding, and it was recorded by me, but the room, they had some microphones in the room, but everybody wasn't using them. And so sometimes it's kind of hard to hear them. It kind of cuts out just a little bit. I've done the best I can to make the audio as clear as possible, but I will say this is something you probably won't ever hear anywhere else. I don't know if there's any other recordings of it, to tell you the truth. But this is definitely a fun event to be at, and you get to hear the cast members talking to each other and discussing things. And it's somebody described it last week as like it was you're sitting in the living room at Thanksgiving, listening to family talk. And I thought that was a really good discussion, really good description of what this is like. So we're going to hear from them, then we're going to do a little bit of trivia, and then hear from this week in Mayberry history. So let's go ahead and get this started. Again, this is in Newcastle, Indiana. It starts off, so for those that are not watching the video version, there is a video version, and I encourage you to watch this on video because you get to see these cast members talking. But you're going to hear from, I believe Rodney Dillard starts off at the beginning talking. You'll hear Rodney. Doug speaks up. He's got the lower voice. You'll hear him. Ernest T. Bass, Howard Morris, you'll hear him. And during this portion is when Maggie actually got there. She wasn't there last week. If you were listening to last week, she came walking in, and Howard Morris will say, "Oh, and we were just joined by Maggie Peterson." And of course, you're going to hear from Betty and James. So let's get this thing going. I hope you're going to enjoy it.
But you realize how I have such tremendous respect for this man, because not only the Andy Griffith Show, but the thing that he really pioneered in television with the Show of Shows with Sid Caesar. Has anybody seen the reruns on the specials they did? It's incredible what these guys did. There's just no words for it.
I mean, it was good. Oh,
no, it was incredible.
Thank you. One answer to your question a few minutes ago, there are millions of people yet that can identify with all the characters on the Andy Griffith Show, except Barney, and every one of those millions know somebody that Barney reminds them of.
It was an innovation in television because Andy was a single male parent raising a child in the 60s. That was a pretty avant-garde thing, wasn't it?
Right.
Sounds kind of dirty to me.
Here we go. No, it's true. It's unusual.
Are you getting answers to the things that you want to know?
What happened to Andy's first wife?
She died.
She died.
I never did hear that.
And there's two other things everybody always wants to know, and that is what was Thelma Lou's job and who played Mr. Schwamp.
Well,
Nobody
Thelma
can
Lou.
come up with the actor's
No.
name that played Mr. Schwamp.
no, I don't know his name either,
He
but
was,
I
he was
remember
a
him
lovely
well.
old guy.
Yeah, really nice.
And he had a funny toupee.
Was he just like an extra?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
An
And
unknown
they
extra.
kind of began
Exactly.
to use it, you know.
And Andy kind of pointed him out and named him Mr. Schwamp.
That was so funny. I know.
We
Andy loved
dances,
names. you
shows
know.
up at all the dances and everything.
Yeah. Well, I never knew what Thelma Lou did either. And people often ask me, what in the world did you do? What kind of job did you have? You had a home, you know. And the only thing I thought was her home probably was her parents and they were gone and she lived there afterward. I didn't even think about that. And once they did bring up something about Thelma Lou at the office, and I kept hoping they wouldn't identify me with anything because I was better off. And then, I guess after about 4 years on the show, Andy had to introduce me to a couple in the show. And suddenly he turned to the director and he said, what's Thelma Lou's last name? And I don't know her last name. And I said, no, I don't want a last name. I've been Thelma Lou all along. Don't dare give me a last name. I like it the way it is. So they didn't. I said, all you have to say is, this is Thelma Lou. I mean, oh, well, all right.
You sense the anger and the passion.
You bet.
Did you guys have to do screening tests? I mean, did you come forward and say that you wanted to try out for Thelma Lou, or did you have to?
Well, I was working at Disney on Texas John Slaughter. I was co-starring with Tom Tryon in a series there. And they called in and had me come in to see about, I thought just one shot. I didn't know what it was. I'd seen the show twice and loved this show, so I was anxious to come in. But they had me read for them. Aaron Rubin, Bob Swing, the director. So I read the scene.
And you were reading for Thelma Lou? Were you reading for
Thelma Lou.
Okay.
Yeah. And they'd had two other girls that were very good. I saw both of them. And I almost did a scene that was almost like the one they'd had on a couple of weeks before. I said, gee, this is same thing I just saw on television a couple of weeks ago with Barney, and I think it was, what was her name? She goes out with us occasionally. Amzie. That's it. Couldn't think of it.
Did you
Anyway.
get the job, by the way?
I got it. Anyway, it worked out. They called me back, so that was nice. Every now and then they'd call me for a job. I'd go in. That was it.
Next question.
I had a similar experience. Yes, sir?
No, you're up.
Well, no, you're standing. What is it?
I have a question for the Dillards, and I know Mitch is going to talk about it at the show a little bit about working with one of the great character actors, maybe of all time, Denver Pyle. And I think James can give some perspective there too from working with him on Dukes. But I know Mitch was going to speak specifically about it at the show, but I just kind of wanted to know what it was like to work with him. I'm always enjoying hearing him.
Denver was a friend.
As I asked the question.
There he would visit. He came up to visit me in Branson, and I was working in a show in a theater there with Jim Stafford, and I brought him up on the stage, and the place just became electric. It was like Elvis was resurrected. The response to him, and sometimes it's hard to get out of the Branson audience, but it was a standing ovation. So that gives you some idea of the respect that the country had for him. He's a great guy. I love him.
You all know we were just joined by Maggie Peterson, for whom I still got the heart.
wedding again all over.
Yeah.
Tell us a story about the car that y'all bought with Denver that time and you wrote the notes to the.
Oh, I know.
Oh, with the Dillards, we had a show, it was shortly after we had done one of our episodes, and we went to Salina, Kansas to do a show, the Dillards in Denver and myself. So we found ourselves in Salina, and Denver had relatives in Boulder, Colorado, and I have relatives in Greeley, Colorado, my sister where I grew up. But we didn't have any, there was no planes, nothing to get from Salina to Denver. So Denver also had a relative that owned a used car lot in Salina. So we went over to the used car lot and looked around, kicked some tires, slammed some doors, and Denver picked out and probably, what would you say, 64, no, probably 57 older model Buick. Well, but anyway, it had portholes on it. And it was sort of black and white, and it had 4 holes. He called it the 4-holer. I'll take the 4-holer. So I think we paid about $200 for it. And we drove, and we were driving along from Salina to Denver in the car, and we opened up the glove compartment. And the poor people that had owned the car before us had left their identification, their address, their names were in the glove compartment. So Denver said, well, let's have a little fun. So, so every town we stopped at, we would send them a postcard and report to them how well the Buick was doing. And as you know, how these kind of jokes kind of grow sometimes. It just got out of hand. Every place we went from then on, for about a year after, we would send these people postcards and tell them, the Buick, she's a-going fine. and I went to Hawaii, and I sent a card from Hawaii. The Buick is just doing fine over here. And Denver went to Alaska and sent them one, said, she's coming right along here. But that sort of illustrates Denver's sense of humor. So
I got a car story with Denver. Denver had he had that old Woody, that old Woody station wagon, and he came up to my house for dinner one night, and Mitch was there. And Mitch is always the good Samaritan, ready to jump in and help anybody. He's sort of like Grover, And we were sitting in the living room, and he says, "You got to come out and see my car. It's beautiful." And about that time, we heard these brakes squeal and this horrible crash. We went out, he had parked on the street, and a drunk had locked bumpers with us, but he'd taken the whole side out of Denver's Woody. And before we could get out there, Mitch had run out there and was helping the guy get the car, the bumper off of Denver's car. And the minute he did that, before we get out there, the guy took off. So Mitch said, "Sure, I'll help you. Step aside." Jumping up and down, but we're saying, "No, Mitch, no, don't do this." And the minute he got loose, that guy was in that car and gone. Left Denver with a crashed Woody.
I'd be interested to hear some comments or maybe a story about Ron Howard. I have a 5-year-old son, and this little guy wears me out. And I cannot imagine a young boy on the set of a television show. What did he do when he was bored? Television, I'm sure, was not the most exciting thing all the time.
Yes, it was.
I remember he had a big Civil War battlefield set up in his dressing room. And he would encourage people to come in and play Civil War soldier with him. He'd sit there and go.
Oh, my memories of him is he was the most polite and he was just a great kid. The other thing, his parents were always with him, so maybe that's the key. They never, both his mother and father were always on the set. Isn't that right, Betty?
I was on the show before all of those lovely people here were introduced into it. And so I knew him when he was very tiny, little boy. But his parents both were actors, and they were not like some stage parents that you hear about. It was a natural thing to them. They were very professional, and they were not thrilled over being, like some of them are so, it's like they're the star or something, the parents. You'd be surprised how irritating that can be. But Grants and Jeannie were just sweet, wonderful people and not impressed by what their son was doing or that they were doing. And Ron was a natural, as they say. He and Natalie Wood, two children actors that I worked with, just had it. It was completely real and natural to them. And I think he told us at one point he wanted to be a producer and director. And I remember saying, well, don't forget me when you get there. Of course, I'm so old now, doesn't make any difference. But Ron had that in mind when he was very young. And he really did it. And we're all proud and thrilled. You'd think we were his parents the way all of us feel about him. We love him. Just love him.
Can I tell a quick story about him?
Whoops. There you go.
I get this, holding this means I can tell it. He did a movie called Splash. And I had a small part in it, which I went in and read for with him, and we commiserated with one another, and we embraced, and we talked about the Andy Griffith Show, and so on and so on. And I read, and I said, thanks. And he said, thank you for coming and reading. And I walked out, which is what you do after a reading. And you hope you'll hear from him sometime. And I walked down the park, this was at Disney, I walked down the parking lot to my car, and I opened the door, and I was just getting in when I heard running footsteps. I said, what the heck is that? and it turned out he was yelling at me, Howie, don't go, I want to talk to you. It was Ron, the director. And I said, what do you want? He said, I just want to tell you, you got the part. Now, never in the history of films has a director ever done that. And that came straight from his parents. They taught him polite, they taught him nice, they taught him believable. And that's what he is. He's very tall now.
I was very fortunate to do a Gunsmoke with Ronnie Howard. He was a teenager at that time, and he was so brilliant on that. And we had a lovely lady. Unfortunately, with my senior moment, I cannot remember the lady's name from Broadway who played his mother in the Gunsmoke. But we did it, and it was nominated for an Emmy. We didn't win, but it wasn't because Ronnie Howard didn't give a wonderful performance, and I was very flattered to have been on the Andy Griffith Show a couple of times, because working with that cast, as they've said, it was like going home, you know. Indiana is my home, by the way. I lived here, I grew up here until I went into the service. But,
what part of Indiana?
Corydon. Corydon, Indiana, that's where it is. First state capital. And by the way, the governor, I played basketball with him, used to protect him in the fist fights. Also, we sacked groceries together at Kroger's. I'm digressing here. Anyway, I was just talking about Ronnie Howard and this cast, because they've invited me on several of the occasions, and I always felt like I was coming back to a family, even though I didn't do that many shows.
Nice story.
I wanted to say about Ronnie Howard, my sister Phyllis is here with me, and at the time, her children were, I think Bobby, her son, is about the same age as Ronnie, and I was doing one of the shows, so I had my nephew Bobby and Amy come on the set, and Ronnie Howard was so polite, so gracious. He just said, hello, come on in, and they played together all day. I mean, he was just a great kid.
All right, so guys, I hope you've enjoyed that That is just so fun to get to hear that again. I haven't heard it since 2002, and I hope you have enjoyed it. Can you believe that was 15 minutes, by the way? That was 15 minutes, that part, and another 15 last week. So it was a 30-minute panel, and that 15 minutes for this episode went by very fast. So somebody had asked Howard Morris, that was him talking about Ron running up to him and saying, "You got the part." What part he played on Splash? Well, if you watch the movie Splash, that was with Daryl Hannah and Tom Hanks. Howard is a bum, and I believe he's in a trash can at one point. He pops up out of it. So that's who he was in that movie. So, and if you think about it, you may think, oh, or how did Ron really know him? Because Howard Morris only did 5 episodes as Ernest T or something like that. Well, but Howard Morris also directed episodes of the Andy Griffith Show. So Ron had met him 10, 12 times at least already. So I'm sure that there was probably more than that. He may have directed other things that Ron had been in. So this was, anyway, I thought that was a really nice story. James Best, he didn't really talk much until there right at the end. He talked about Ronnie. And hopefully you were able to pick out who was talking. And if you didn't, go and watch the video version. If you've watched the audio version or listened, I guess you could watch the audio version. It'd be kind of boring. But if you listened, you could watch the video later. The links, if you go to the twocairsnowaiting.com, you'll be able to find all that stuff. All right, so let's play a little bit of trivia. Trivia music. So we're playing trivia from Scott Hopkins' book that we talked about at the beginning of the show that Weavers has for sale. So we're going to do 5 questions. So get your pencils out. Let's see how you're going to do. Our folks in the chat room have been, they're already ready for the questions. So I hope you are too. So here we go. What talent does Howard Sprague display on Colonel Tim's Talent Time? Now, that's a color episode, so you're going to have to think about it if you don't know. All right. What talent does Howard Sprague display on Colonel Tim's Talent Time? All right. So since this is a podcast and you can pause because it's a podcast, you can pause this if you don't want to know the answer, because here comes the answer. What talent does Howard Sprague display on Colonel Tim's Talent Time? That would be, he told jokes, comedy. Anything similar to that, you get credit. So good job. All right. So he's telling jokes. Yeah. Yeah. What about Floyd? How soon they forget. That's on that one. All right. All right. Number 2. Name one thing that Frank Myers plans to buy after cashing in his bond. Okay. Name one thing that Frank Myers plans to buy after he cashes in his bond. Okay, so do you know that one? If you don't want to know the answer, you can pause. There's several things you could have chosen. You get 1 point if you just get one of them. You don't get multiple points. But it would be impressive if you know all the different things he said. So what one thing? It could be any of these things. Name one thing that Frank Myers plans to buy after cashing in his bonds. Well, he planned to buy these things. An air conditioner, a stove, a color TV, or a stereo phonograph. So if you said stereo, that works as well. So it's an air conditioner, a stove, a color TV, and a stereo phonograph. Those are the things he was going to buy after he cashed in his bond. Okay, so that was you might have got that because you had multiple chances. All right, number 3. Okay, this one should be pretty easy. According to Andy, who will just nasty away when he dies? According to Andy, who will just nasty away when he dies? Okay. All right. According to Andy, who will just nasty away when he dies? All right. So the answer is, pause if you don't want to know, who's going to nasty away? Ben Weaver. Yeah, Ben Weaver. That's who. All right. Number 4. Where does Mayor Stoner purchase a bed jacket? Where does Mayor Stoner purchase a bed jacket? Now, this one's pretty hard. This one's hard, I think. I wouldn't get this one. Maybe that's why I think it's hard. Where does Mayor Stoner purchase a bed jacket? Remember, he's trying to get Eagle Eye Andy, not from Andy. He bought the bed jacket. Okay, here's where he bought it. Mayor Stoner purchased the bed jacket at Lucan's. It's Luken ', Lucan's Style Shop. Lucan's. I'll give it to you if you even got just Lucan's. Luden's is close, but that's a cough drop. But it's Lucan's. All right. So good job even if you got Luden's. I didn't know Lucan's. So good job. All right. Here's our last question for today. Again, it's coming out of the Mayberry Trivia book by Scott Hopkins. Head over to Weaver's. Pick you up a copy. And don't cheat. Okay, here's the last question. With whom does Sally like to dance with? With whom does Sally like to dance at O'Malley's cabin? With whom does Sally like to dance with at O'Malley's cabin? I love these things. These just make me laugh. With whom does Sally like to dance at O'Malley's cabin? All right, so the answer is Al. Al, honey, you've changed. That's the quote that kept popping in my head. Al, honey, you've changed. With whom does Sally like to dance at O'Malley's cabins? Al. Of course, that's Barney. She kept, stop calling me Al. So how'd you do? How did you do? That was 5 questions for you from Mayberry Trivia from Scott Hopkins. Hope you did well. And even if you didn't do well, hope you had fun trying to think of it and just remembering some of those fun episodes that those bring to mind. Those are great. All right. So finally, we're going to go over and hear from This Week in Mayberry History.
Welcome to This Week in Mayberry History, a report by Special Correspondent Randy Turner of the Gomer and Cooper Pyle Comic Book Literary Guild of the Mayberry Historical Society.
As I research these reports, I'm often amazed at the interesting careers people playing even the slightest of roles enjoyed. Johnny Silver is a great example. Johnny was a small man who played a small part in an episode of The Andy Griffith Show, but he was large on talent. Johnny was born on April the 16th, 1918 in East Chicago, Indiana. He began performing early, making a singing debut while still a child on a local radio station. When he was 14, his family moved to California. After having been awarded scholarships, Johnny attended Los Angeles City College, where he not only continued singing, but also directed shows. He performed and became friends with John Raitt while still a college student. Raitt would go on to be an acclaimed Broadway performer, best known in musical theater for his roles in Carousel, Oklahoma, and The Pajama Game, and he reprised his lead role in the film version of The Pajama Game opposite Doris Day. But to many, he may be better known as the father of singer and guitarist Bonnie Raitt. And I can't resist adding that his grandson, Bay Raitt, is the digital modeler and animator responsible for the creation of Gollum's face in the Lord of the Rings film universe. During World War II, Johnny served in the Army, deployed in special services, initially in charge of finding entertainment for his fellow troops. In that process, he met Mario Lanza. The future singing and film star helped get Johnny into not only securing talent, but being talent, by getting him cast in a play co-written by Frank Lesser, who later became a renowned songwriter for Broadway musicals. After the war, Johnny moved to New York to pursue a career in entertainment. He met his future wife in 1946 while performing at the Old Knickerbocker Music Hall in a vaudeville show. In February 1950, Johnny made his television debut in the anthology show NBC Television Opera Theater. By May, he had appeared in 2 other episodes of the series. While one has to have talent to make it, it doesn't hurt to know the right people. In 1950, the same year that Johnny first appeared on television, his old Army buddy Frank Lesser, who wrote the play Johnny had performed in while in the service, created his second hit musical, Guys and Dolls, and he was instrumental in making sure Johnny was cast in the play. Guys and Dolls is based on the writings of Damon Runyon. Johnny originated the role of Benny Southstreet in the musical, which after a pre-Broadway tryout in Philadelphia, opened on Broadway on November the 24th, 1950. The musical co-starred Robert Alda as Sky Masterson, who, like John Raitt, had a magnificent Broadway career, but may be better known to many as the father of Alan Alda, the star of MASH. Guys and Dolls was nominated for the Tony Award as Best Musical. It won. The director was nominated for the Tony for Best Direction of a Musical. He won. The show was nominated for Best Choreography. It won. Isabel Bigley, who played Sarah Brown, the object of Sky Masterson's affections, was nominated for Best Performance by a Featured Actress in a Musical. She won. And Robert Alda was nominated for Best Performance by a Leading Actor in a Musical, and he won. Needless to say, the show was a smash hit. It ran for 1,200 performances and has been revived many times. And since we've already discussed 2 other similar examples, I would be remiss not to mention that the book of the musical was co-written by humorist Abe Burrows, who later won both the Tony and Pulitzer Prize, but is better known to many now as the father of James Burrows, the television director who co-created the long-running sitcom Cheers, and who has directed well over 1,000 episodes of various series, including every episode of Will and Grace during its initial 8-year run. Johnny returned to TV again, playing a character in a 1954 episode of The Lone Wolf, with a name that sounded like it could have come straight out of a Damon Runyon story, Johnny for Instance. He then reprised his role of Benny Southstreet in the 1955 movie version of Guys and Dolls. The movie version had Marlon Brando assume the role of Sky Masterson, but let's not discuss that casting choice any further. But the film did involve another individual who it would be beneficial for Johnny to know, and that undoubtedly resulted in his playing a small part in Mayberry. That person is Sheldon Leonard, who played another tough guy in the musical, Harry the Horse. All during this time, and in fact throughout his long career, Johnny also directed many productions for both local and professional theaters. Next week, we'll continue our look at his long career in film and television, which included a small role in The Andy Griffith Show. That's it for this week. As always, thanks for listening. And remember to take care of yourself, take care of others, and take Andy's advice and go out there and act like somebody.
Thank you, Randy. And Randy always comes up with these amazing reports. If you want to make sure you don't miss out on any of the fun Mayberry stuff that Randy's doing on the internet, send him an email at turnersgrade@gmail.com. turnersgrade@gmail.com, and he'll make sure you don't miss out on anything. So thanks again, Randy. I'd said earlier that I thought Howard Morris had been a bum in a garbage can in Splash. That's a different, I think that was Baywatch, actually, that I was thinking about. It was on a beach, so it was in my mind. So Howard had actually played a character named Dr. Zidell, and he was in some scenes, at least with Eugene Levy, because I was able to find those. But Dr. Zidell, Zidell, was the character he played on Splash. So go check that out if you're watching it, if you want to watch that movie. It's been a long time since I've seen it. So one last thing I want to say before we get out of here. I want to say, 2 things. If you didn't know who Johnny Silver was, who that is on the Andy Griffith Show, just so you'll know, if you watch the episode, The Great Filling Station Robbery, That's where they're stealing stuff out of Wally's while Wally's gone, and they think Jimmy is stealing the tools and things like that. Well, the fella who's doing it, he's hiding in the trunk of the car and getting out, and he's the one that gets shocked by the cash register. Well, that's who we're talking about. That's who Randy's reporter's on. So if you couldn't picture him in your mind, that's who the report was on. All right. So, and now finally, we want to say happy birthday, because today, as I record this, is the 19th of April, and it is Eleanor Donahue's birthday. And her son, Peter, his birthday is also coming up on the 22nd. So let's just say happy birthday to both of them this week. He posted a really nice picture of the two of them. He must have been 6 years old, maybe 6, 5, something like that in the picture of he and Eleanor. He posted it on his Facebook page here recently, and it's just a really nice picture. So their birthdays are really close together, but about 25 years apart. That's why he did want to say that as well. So folks, I hope you have had a good time. I hope you've enjoyed the podcast. You learned some stuff. You got to see some things that you may not have known, or hear some things you didn't know. We found out from the cast members themselves, they don't know Mr. Schwamp's name, and we're asking them. So now you've heard them specifically say they don't know him. They know who he is, but they don't know his name. So we've said that hundreds of times here on the podcast, and okay, I exaggerate, tens and tens of times. So we don't know Mr. Schwamp's real name, but they do remember him, but they don't know his name. So I hope you guys enjoyed everything. I'd love to hear from you. You can give me a call at 888-684-8415, or drop me an email at floyd@imayberry.com. Until next week, everybody, have a great Mayberry week, and we'll see you next time.